The air on Valera 7 was synthetically perfect, as befitted the central diplomatic station of the Galactic Council. 300 species had their environmental preferences catered to within these hallowed halls, each atmospheric bubble precisely maintained to sustain life forms from gas-breathing Xanthi to the silicon-based Voldorians. Yet despite this technological marvel of inclusivity, Admiral Kate Morrison couldn't help but feel the subtle message behind it all: conform or suffer. She stood at the large viewport gazing at the artificial star cluster that marked the Council's seat of power. Her reflection showed a woman in her mid-50s, silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, the blue and gold uniform of Earth's combined space forces immaculate as always. The years had carved determination into her face, but hadn't dulled the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? Ambassador Harrison joined her at the window, his diplomatic uniform more ornate, but no less formal. 200 years since we developed FTL travel, and here we are summoned like schoolchildren to the principal's office. Summoned is a polite term, Morrison replied, not taking her eyes off the stars. When you're invited by a fleet of dreadnoughts at your borders, it's hardly a social call. Their third companion approached, datapad in hand. Dr. Cameron was the scientific genius whose breakthroughs in quantum mechanics had accelerated humanity's expansion to 47 worlds in the span of 2 centuries, a pace that apparently had made the older species of the galaxy uncomfortable. "I've analyzed the council chamber," Cameron said softly. 17 separate surveillance systems, 3 of which violate the diplomatic protocols they themselves established. They're watching us more closely than they've watched any delegation in 50 years. Of course they are. Morrison finally turned from the view. We're the upstarts, the troublemakers, the ones who don't know their place. Harrison sighed. 200 years is nothing to them. The Zor Empire has been spacefaring for 8,000 years. The Vexthal for nearly 12,000. We're infants, by their reckoning. Infants who've colonized 47 worlds, while the Vexthal have added 3 in the same time period, Cameron added with a hint of pride. Infants who've developed shield technology that rivals the Kephalarians, despite their 5 millennium head start. Morrison's mouth tightened, and therein lies our problem. Their conversation was interrupted by the chime that indicated the council was ready to receive them. Morrison squared her shoulders. Harrison straightened his collar, and Cameron tucked away the datapad. Together, the 3 representatives of humanity walked toward what they all sensed would be far more than a standard diplomatic meeting. The council chamber was designed to intimidate, a massive circular arena with 300 podiums arranged in concentric ring species placed according to their seniority in galactic affairs. Humanity's position was in the outermost ring alongside other emergent civilizations with less than a millennium of interstellar travel. As Morrison and her companions took their places, she felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon them, some curious, some wary, and many too many openly hostile. The ancient Zor representative supreme commander, Zalek, rose from the innermost circle. His scaled skin caught the light, and the translator implanted behind Morrison's ear conveyed his resonant voice with perfect clarity. Representatives of Earth and the human colonies, you have been called before this council to address matters of grave concern. His compound eyes swept over the 3 humans. Your species' rate of expansion has become problematic. Your technological development curve exceeds accepted parameters. Your military buildup suggests intentions incompatible with galactic harmony. Morrison kept her face neutral, though she noted Harrison's slight stiffening beside her. The council has deliberated, Zalek continued, and we have prepared a stability accord for humanity's immediate implementation. A data transfer notification pinged on their devices. Cameron discreetly began scanning the document as Zalek outlined its major points. Humanity will cease colonial expansion for a period of no less than 500 years. All proprietary shield technology and quantum communication advances will be surrendered to council oversight. A regulatory body of senior council species will establish permanent monitoring stations throughout human space. Future technological developments will require Council approval before implementation. Each point landed like a physical blow, but Morrison's expression remained impassive. Only the tightening of her hands on the podium betrayed her reaction. "These measures are not punitive," interjected the Vexthal representative, Elder Lozerath, his tentacles waving in what their cultural briefings had identified as a gesture of false reassurance. "They are protective for all parties. Rapid expansion leads to instability. Unchecked technological growth leads to danger. We have seen civilizations destroy themselves and others through such unconstrained development. And should we decline these protective measures?" Harrison asked, his diplomatic training allowing him to keep his voice steady. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Kephalarian trade minister, a being whose crystalline body structure refracted light in hypnotic patterns, leaned forward. "The accord is not optional, Ambassador," she said, each word precisely enunciated. "The Council has authorized enforcement measures should compliance not be forthcoming within 30 standard days." Morrison recognized the term for what it was, a euphemism for military action. The threat was clear. "The Council wishes peace," Zalek concluded. "But peace requires order. Order requires conformity." Morrison stepped forward. "The human delegation requests 48 hours to review this document and consult with our government." The demand caused another ripple of murmurs. Such consultations were usually granted weeks, not hours. "Your haste is noted," Zalek said, with a tone that suggested disapproval. "Nevertheless, we grant this request. The Council will reconvene in 48 hours to receive humanity's formal acceptance of the accord." "Not response," Morrison noted. "Acceptance." The decision had already been made for them. As they left the chamber, Harrison waited until they were in a secure area before speaking. "They're not even pretending this is a negotiation." "It's surrender dressed as diplomacy," Morrison agreed. "Cameron." The scientist looked up from the datapad, face grave. "It's worse than they outlined. The technical appendices essentially place us under complete technological guardianship. We'd need permission to upgrade our water filtration systems." "Options?" Morrison asked as they entered their designated quarters. "Play for time," Harrison suggested. "Ask for clarifications amendments." "They won't grant them," Cameron interrupted. "The document is too carefully crafted. Every loophole has been closed." "Then we negotiate in bad faith while preparing our defenses," Harrison said. "We can't possibly win a war against the entire Council, but we might force better terms if we show we're willing to fight." Morrison was silent for a long moment. "There's a third option." Both turned to her. "We've been developing something, a contingency for exactly this scenario." She looked at Cameron. "Project Exodus." Cameron's eyes widened. "That's theoretical. We haven't even begun practical." "We began 2 years ago," Morrison said quietly, "when the Council first started restricting our access to certain star systems. When they began suggesting which technologies were safe for us to pursue." "What is Project Exodus?" Harrison demanded. Morrison's gaze was steady. "We walk away from the table." "Walk away to where?" Harrison scoffed. "There's nowhere in the galaxy beyond their reach." A slight smile touched Morrison's lips. "Who said anything about staying in the galaxy?" The 48 hours that followed were the most intense of Morrison's career. While publicly they requested clarifications and proposed minor amendments to the accord, all rejected as expected, their secure communications with Earth were continuous. Project Exodus had been theoretical once, as Cameron had said. The ability to create a quantum fold that would effectively remove humanity from detectable space-time, relocating their entire civilization to the void between galaxies, where they could rebuild, regroup, and eventually return on their own terms. The energy requirements were staggering, the coordination required unprecedented. But humanity had anticipated this day. Preparations had been underway since the first subtle signs of the Council's growing unease with human advancement. The fold generators are in place on all 47 colonies. Reported Major Carter during their encrypted communication. Earth's population is prepared for the temporary hardships of the transition. The question is timing. Simultaneous exodus across all human worlds, Morrison decided. The moment we deliver our answer to the Council. The military implications, Harrison asked. We can't take everything, Carter admitted. Fixed installations, orbitals, some of the larger colony infrastructure will have to be abandoned. We're prioritizing people, essential equipment, and knowledge. And once we're elsewhere, Harrison pressed, what then? We wait. No. Morrison's voice was hard. We fight, just not in the way they expect. Dr. Barnes, the quantum physicist who'd developed the Exodus technology with Cameron, explained their strategy. The fold doesn't just relocate us. It gives us access points, quantum windows through which we can observe and eventually reach back into normal space. We won't be launching fleets. We'll be conducting a shadow campaign. Precise strikes, intelligence gathering, disruption. A war they can't fight back against, Morrison summarized, because they won't know where we are or how we're hitting them. As the meeting concluded, Morrison was left alone with Harrison and Cameron in their quarters. The ambassador paced nervously. This is unprecedented, he said. An entire species disappearing. The Council will view it as the ultimate defiance. Good, Morrison replied simply. And when we return, what then? Morrison's gaze was distant, seeing beyond the immediate crisis to a future few could imagine. Then we establish a new order, not through conquest, but by demonstrating a better way. The Council's stagnation is its weakness. 300 species locked in a hierarchy based on age rather than merit. Change is coming, whether they welcome it or not. Cameron looked troubled. The younger species, what happens to them when we vanish? It was a concern Morrison had considered deeply. We've made contact with several. The Talari, the Novan Collective, even some Vexthal reformists. They know something is coming, not the details, but enough to prepare. Allies? Harrison asked, surprised. Potential allies, Morrison corrected, seeds of something new. As the deadline approached, Morrison stood again at the viewport, looking at the stars that would soon appear, very different to human eyes. Harrison joined her, his earlier skepticism replaced with a grim determination. You've known this was coming for years, he said. It wasn't a question. The signs were there for anyone willing to see them, she replied. The Council doesn't foster cooperation, it enforces compliance. Younger species innovate, older ones appropriate. The pattern is millennia old. And we're breaking it. We're breaking it, she agreed. The chamber was even more crowded when they returned. Word had spread of the humans' resistance to the Accord, and representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness what many expected to be humanity's humbling. Morrison stood at the podium, Harrison and Cameron flanking her. Supreme Commander Zalek looked down from his elevated position with ill-concealed impatience. Has humanity prepared its formal acceptance of the Stability Accord? He demanded. Morrison looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of various species. The ancient powers in the inner circle, the middling civilizations who had found their comfortable place in the hierarchy, and the younger species in the outer rings, watching with a mixture of sympathy and fear, knowing they might one day face a similar moment. Humanity has considered the Accord. Morrison began, her voice clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We have studied its provisions, its implications, and the philosophies that underpin it. A ripple of anticipation moved through the assembly. For 2 centuries, humanity has reached for the stars with hope and ambition. We have sought knowledge connection and mutual prosperity. We have approached the galactic community with open hands and open minds. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. This was not the meek acceptance they had expected. In return, we have encountered a system that does not reward innovation but punishes it. that does not celebrate diversity but constrains it, that does not nurture growth but stifles it. Zalek rose, his massive form looming. Admiral Morrison, this body has not assembled to hear philosophical objections to. I am delivering humanity's formal response as requested. Morrison cut him off, causing gasps throughout the chamber. Interrupting a First Circle representative was virtually unheard of. Morrison continued undeterred. The Stability Accord is not an invitation to partnership. It is a demand for submission. It would reduce humanity to a client state, our potential forever capped our destiny, forever controlled. The Kephalarian trade minister's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. You test the Council's patience, Admiral. Your response should be acceptance or, we reject the accord, Morrison declared, her voice ringing through the sudden silence. And we withdraw from the Galactic Council entirely. The chamber erupted. Shouts of outrage from the inner circles. Threats and demands. Warnings of consequences. Morrison stood immobile at the center of the storm, waiting for the cacophony to subside. When it finally did, Zalek's voice was cold with fury. This is unprecedented defiance. You cannot simply withdraw. The enforcement protocols have already been rendered irrelevant, Morrison stated. As we speak, humanity is leaving your jurisdiction. Not our planets. We cannot take those with us, but our people, our ships, our technology, everything that makes us who we are. Confusion replaced anger on many alien faces. The concept was so foreign that many couldn't grasp it. Impossible, the Vextal Elder sputtered. Where would you go? There is nowhere in the galaxy beyond Council reach. Morrison allowed herself a small smile. Precisely. At that moment, her secure communicator vibrated against her wrist. The signal. Across human space, 48 quantum fold generators had activated simultaneously. What humanity cannot build within your system, we will build outside it, Morrison said. What we cannot achieve under your constraints, we will achieve beyond them. And when we return, and we will return, it will be as equals, not supplicants. Alarms began sounding throughout the station. The Zor commander received an urgent communication, his scaled face registering shock as he absorbed whatever news was being delivered. Human ships vanishing from sensors, he reported, disbelief evident in his tone. All across the galaxy, colonies going silent. It's as if they're simply disappearing. Not disappearing, Morrison corrected. Leaving, by our choice on our terms. She glanced at Harrison and Cameron, who nodded. It was time. For those who believe in a different vision of galactic society, one based on merit rather than age on cooperation, rather than control, know that humanity has not abandoned you. We have merely changed the nature of our presence. Morrison raised her hand in what could have been a farewell or perhaps a promise. We'll be watching, and we'll be waiting for the day when the galaxy is ready for true partnership. With those words, a shimmer enveloped the three humans. The quantum fold, precisely calculated, opened around them. To the watching council, it appeared as though the human representatives simply faded from existence, their forms becoming translucent before disappearing altogether. The last thing Morrison saw was the look of utter shock on Supreme Commander Zalek's face, the first time in perhaps millennia that the ancient being had encountered something completely beyond his understanding or control. Then, the council chamber was gone, replaced by the shimmering quantum interface of the fold space that would be humanity's home for the foreseeable future. It worked, Cameron breathed, looking at the ethereal environment around them, a space between spaces where the laws of physics, as most species understood them, were merely suggestions. Phase 1 worked, Morrison corrected. Now the real work begins. In the days that followed, the Galactic Council descended into a chaos unprecedented in its million-year history. Search fleets dispatched to human colonies found abandoned infrastructure, but no people, no ships, no portable technology. Surveillance systems registered no human communications, no warp signatures, no quantum entanglement signals. Humanity, for all practical purposes, had ceased to exist within the bounds of the galaxy. But they had not ceased to act upon it. 2 weeks after the disappearance, a Zor military convoy vanished near what had once been human space. A month later, the Kephalarian Central Data Repository suffered a catastrophic breach, with sensitive trade agreements and blackmail material suddenly appearing in the public data streams of a dozen worlds. Council ships began encountering empty space, where their navigational charts showed weapons platforms should be. Communication relays failed at critical moments. Supply chains experienced mysterious disruptions that couldn't be traced to any known cause. The Shadow War had begun. Within the quantum fold, humanity was building something new. The space between galaxies, vast, empty, and previously thought uninhabitable, became their canvas. Massive energy collectors harvested the sparse particles of the void. Construction ships assembled habitats, research stations, and eventually the framework for an entirely new civilization. The Terran Commonwealth, they called it. Not bound to planets or star systems, but to principles: innovation, cooperation, self-determination. From their unique vantage point, humanity could observe the galaxy through quantum windows, effectively one-way mirrors into normal space-time. They watched as the Council's rigid structure began to show cracks. Younger species, emboldened by humanity's example, began questioning traditions. Economic systems optimized for the benefit of ancient powers faced mounting challenges. "They're sending another expedition to find us," reported Commander Reyes, now head of Commonwealth Intelligence. 5 years had passed since the Exodus. Largest one yet, 50 ships including technology borrowed from 3 different species. Morrison, now holding the rank of Fleet Admiral, nodded. The Commonwealth's central planning hub was a marvel of engineering, a spherical chamber where holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy gathered through their quantum observation points. "Let them search," she said. "The void between galaxies is vast, and we leave no traces their sensors can detect." "The Talari have made contact again," Harrison added. In the years since the Exodus, the ambassador had become the Commonwealth's chief diplomat to those few species with whom they maintained secret communications. Their delegation requests another meeting. "Arrange it," Morrison agreed. They've proven themselves reliable allies. The Talari were one of several younger species who had recognized the flaws in the Council system. In the power vacuum created by humanity's departure and the subsequent Shadow Campaign, these species had gradually formed a loose coalition of their own one that operated largely beneath the notice of the First Circle powers. "And the Vexthal reformists?" Morrison asked. Harrison's expression was positive. "Growing in influence, the disruptions to the old supply chains have forced many conservative factions to reconsider their positions. Change is happening, Admiral. Slowly, but it's happening." "Not slowly enough for some," Cameron interjected, approaching with a new report. The scientist had aged visibly in the 5 years since the Exodus, the stress of developing and maintaining the quantum fold technology taking its toll. "The Zor are proposing extreme measures: militarization of all major space lanes, mandatory tracking implants for citizens of all Council worlds. They're using our terrorism as justification for a security state." Morrison frowned. This had always been the risk, that their actions would trigger a backlash that harmed the very species they hoped would eventually build a better galactic order. "Then perhaps it's time for Phase 3, she said after a moment's consideration. Harrison and Cameron exchanged glances. Phase 3. The return had been planned as a much more distant possibility. "Are we ready?" Harrison asked. Morrison gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. The Commonwealth had grown exponentially in the void. What had begun as emergency habitats were now vast self-sustaining structures. Their technology, freed from Council restrictions, had advanced decades beyond what would have been possible within the galactic community. "We're ready," she confirmed. "Not for a full return, but for the beginning of one." The plan took shape over the following weeks. not a military invasion. Humanity had no desire to rule through force, but a strategic appearance designed to shock the Council out of its complacency and offer an alternative to both the old order and the Zor's proposed security state. The location was chosen carefully. Valera 7. The same station where humanity had walked away from the table 5 years earlier. The occasion, a special council session to vote on the Zor security measures. Entering position. Reported Captain Walsh from the bridge of the quantum fold ship Pathfinder. The vessel represented the pinnacle of human engineering, a ship capable of traversing the boundary between fold space and normal space-time with precision unimaginable 5 years ago. Morrison stood on the bridge, watching as the quantum window expanded, showing them the council station. It looked exactly as she remembered it. The artificial star cluster, the massive docking rings, the ornate architecture designed to impress and intimidate. Status of the council session, she asked. In progress, Admiral, Communications Officer Liu answered. The Zor proposal is being presented now. We're monitoring their secure channels. Morrison nodded. Prepare for transition. Standard protocol shields at maximum weapons powered but not targeted. We're making a statement, not starting a war. Throughout the ship, the crew made final preparations. They would be the first humans to re-enter normal space since the Exodus, the vanguard of a new approach to galactic relations. Transition in 3, 2, 1. The navigator counted down. The sensation was subtle, a slight shift in the background hum of the engines, a momentary disorientation as the laws of physics reasserted themselves in more familiar ways. Then, with a flash of light, visible across half the Valera system, the Pathfinder emerged into normal space, directly above the council station. Alarms immediately sounded throughout the station. Defense systems activated automatically, though the operators were too shocked to issue targeting commands. On every communication channel, confusion and panic spread as the impossible occurred. A human vessel larger and more advanced than any seen before had appeared without warning in the most secure space in the galaxy. We're being hailed by 17 different authorities. Liu reported a hint of amusement in her voice, including Supreme Commander Zalek himself. Put him through, Morrison ordered, straightening her uniform. The Commonwealth's design was similar to the old Earth Combined Forces uniform, but with subtle differences reflecting their new identity. The view screen activated, showing Zalek's scaled face, his compound eyes widening at the sight of Morrison. Admiral, Morrison. He managed, his usual composure shattered. How? Where have you? Hello, Commander, Morrison greeted him calmly. It's been some time. You disappeared. Zalek stated the obvious. Your entire species. Relocated, Morrison corrected, as I told you we would. Behind Zalek, other council representatives could be seen abandoning their session to cluster around the communication terminal. The Kephalarian Trade Minister, the Vexthal Elder, and dozens of others all staring in disbelief at the human they had assumed was long dead or hiding in some remote corner of the galaxy. Your attacks on council infrastructure, Zalek began, anger replacing shock, were precisely targeted to prevent the militarization you're currently proposing, Morrison interrupted. No lives lost, no civilian infrastructure damaged, only military assets and intelligence systems used to maintain the old hierarchy. You cannot simply... We already did, Morrison said firmly, and now we're offering an alternative. She nodded to Liu, who transmitted a data package to the station. This contains a proposal, not a demand like your stability accord, but an invitation. The Terran Commonwealth extends formal diplomatic recognition to all species willing to engage on the basis of mutual respect and equal standing. The data transfer notification appeared on screens throughout the council chamber. Morrison continued while they processed it. We're establishing an embassy in normal space, a neutral ground where any species can meet with us without council oversight or permission, where technological cooperation will be based on mutual benefit, not age-based restrictions. This is sedition? Zalek sputtered. You're undermining the very foundation of galactic stability. We're offering evolution instead of stagnation, Morrison countered. The Council has maintained peace, yes, but at the cost of progress. At the cost of potential. At the cost of entire civilizations, limited not by their capabilities, but by their birth date. She gestured to the view screen, ensuring her next words were broadcast across all channels. To every species who has felt the weight of Council restrictions, there is another way. To those who have ideas deemed too disruptive by the First Circle, we are listening. To those who believe merit should matter more than age, you have allies. The Pathfinder began to move a deliberate, unhurried course away from the station. No Council vessel moved to intercept, none could match its capabilities, and everyone watching knew it. We'll be establishing our embassy at these coordinates, Morrison said as a final data transmission was sent. Any delegation wishing to establish relations with the Terran Commonwealth will be welcomed. No hierarchies, no suppression of innovation, no mandatory stability at the cost of growth. As the Pathfinder prepared to return to Fold space, Morrison offered a final thought to the watching galaxy. 5 years ago, humanity walked away from your table because we refused to play by rules designed to ensure we could never win. Now we're building our own table, and everyone is invited to sit as equals. With that, the quantum fold enveloped the ship once more, and it vanished from conventional space, but not from the galactic consciousness. The transmission had been broadcast far beyond the Council chamber. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings had witnessed humanity's return and heard their offer. The revolution had begun not with weapons, but with an idea. Not with conquest, but with an invitation. In the months that followed, the Council's authority eroded faster than anyone, even Morrison, had anticipated. The Talari were the first to openly send a delegation to the human embassy, followed by the Novan Collective. Then, in a move that shocked the inner circles, a faction of the Vexthal arrived, young reformists who had seized control of 3 colony worlds. The coalition of emergent species they called themselves. Not a rival to the Council, not yet, but a clear statement that the old order was no longer the only option. 1 year after the Pathfinder's appearance at Valera 7, Morrison stood in the observation dome of Nexus Station, the Commonwealth's embassy in normal space. Below, her representatives from 27 species mingled freely, sharing ideas that would have been restricted under Council protocols. Harrison joined her at the railing. The Zor are finally requesting a meeting, he informed her. Unofficial, of course. They can't be seen formally recognizing us yet. Morrison nodded. Progress. Do you think they'll eventually accept the new reality? Harrison asked. The First Circle species have ruled for so long. Can they adapt to a galaxy where age doesn't automatically confer authority? Morrison watched as a Talari scientist enthusiastically explained a concept to a group that included 2 Vexthal, a Kephalarian junior trade representative, and several humans. The energy in the room was palpable, the excitement of minds freed to explore without artificial constraints. They'll adapt because they must, she said finally. The galaxy is changing. The question isn't whether they'll accept it, but whether they'll help shape it or be left behind by it. She turned from the railing, facing the future she had helped create. Either way, we'll be here, building something better, together. In the vast chamber below, the new galactic order was taking its first tentative steps. Species that had been relegated to the outer rings were finding their voices. Ancient rivals were discovering common ground. And humanity, the species that had walked away from the table, had returned to build a better one. The galaxy had indeed watched in fear as humanity disappeared. Now, it watched with something new, something many species had forgotten over millennia of Council rule. Hope.